Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. And today I have a very special guest. He is returning, I think, for the third time. It's been a little while, but Dr. Mike Israetel is back on the podcast. So, Dr. Mike, welcome back on.
Hey, thanks for having me on again.
I think last time we chatted, you were still in Vegas, I think. So, or maybe you were kind of in the process of moving up to Michigan. How's everything going on that end?
Moved in, settled, and I have the whole gym set up and everything. So all is well.
Yeah, that gym looks pretty impressive. Was that kind of like part of your what you were looking for when you moved out there to get that big gym? And yeah, how did that kind of come about? All right, sorry, we had a little technical difficulty there with the internet. So we were kind of talking about you moved to Michigan, got the gym set up. So I'm curious to hear how that kind of came about, and it's a pretty nice gym you got there. Nice, you know, you got a ton of equipment in there. So I'm just kind of curious to hear about how that came about and everything.
Yeah, it's a 2,500 square foot gym, and we just built it from scratch right on the property. It just simply did not exist, and it took about a year to get the whole thing done. And then when it was done, we had the flooring done, and then the equipment went in, and it was kind of dicey because it was that post-COVID time where a lot of people just didn't want to come to work because they were getting free money from the government or something. So it was really just difficult to find contractors at all sometimes, and definitely for reasonable prices. So, but we got it done. Now we have a gym right in our backyard, and that's really cool. It's spoiling the living shit out of me.
Yeah, how's the transition been? Do you go to other gyms now, or do you pretty much just train at that gym fully now?
Unless I'm traveling, I never go to other gyms, pretty much never. It has my favorite equipment and all the stuff that I need, more than what I need at the gym. And so pretty much every morning or 6 days a week, I go make my workout shakes, walk 60 feet to the gym.
That's nice.
And there it is. Yeah. And it's climate controlled and only my wife and I really use it. And it's kind of neat. And it's also great because we had the thing constructed and set up lighting wise for YouTube. And then when we have people over to do YouTube videos, the filming is super seamless. One thing we got really tired of doing was we would film at other gyms, and there was always some kind of weirdness about asking them to turn the music down.
Yeah.
Some gyms just love to have music blaring at like a trillion decibels. I just don't understand that at all. Because I remember one time it was this gym will remain nameless. It's a great gym, but I remember we were filming and there was only like four other people in the gym, my videographer, myself, and the person we were training. And these four people, so the music was blasting like at rock concert levels. And we look and every single person had headphones in. So we're just like, exactly who is this music for?
Yeah.
And I actually don't, I do think that if I ran a corporate gym, like a commercial gym, I would run it with zero music or very low music because almost everyone wears headphones now. Like it's not something I almost never wear headphones when I train, but it's really trippy to watch because like you'll look around sometimes at the gym. Do you ever do this? And you're like, everybody's wearing headphones. And I mean, like 90 some percent of all people, it's not like 50 or 60%. It's so big. So to me, I don't even know why gyms have music. But also, it's like, there's other people using the equipment, blah, blah, blah. So for filming and for YouTube work, it's super easy. And then for our own stuff, it's really nice to know that you'll never have to change exercise order because somebody else is using a
Yeah.
machine. And it's really good. I think people a lot of times there's something missing from the gym. There's like you're just not in gym culture anymore. Like there's something cool about going to a gym in real life and seeing people do things and just watching people between sets, saying hi to friends. But then again, I think I get enough of that on social media anyway, maybe too much. So I don't really feel super left out. And also, I'm 38 years old. I've had plenty of gym culture, and until I get nostalgic about it, I've had my fill. There's nothing for me at the gym other than weights. So
Yeah, and I think as you like kind of get more experience too, it becomes less about like because I think when you initially get into the gym, it's kind of like you're there kind of for like ego reasons too. And I think like lifting, like that can be motivating. But I feel like once you get to a certain point and when you kind of get a little bit more serious about it, it's almost like that just isn't a factor anymore. It's almost just like you intrinsically are motivated to just go and train on your
Yes,
own anyways.
definitely. And also the lighting at the gym is some of the best lighting in the world because it's custom lighting specifically to look ridiculous. Jared Feather approved it himself, and lighting is the most important thing to him. And so I just look amazing in that gym all the time. So if I go somewhere else, I'm like, this gym sucks. This lighting is terrible. I don't care how I look to other people. I care how I look in the mirror. And then so if I get enough mirror glances, we also have, we have mobile mirrors. They're on stands, and we have four of them, and you can just move them anywhere. So you can get a mirror in front of any piece of equipment, and it's your own dedicated mirror. And it's like, okay, this is really ego heaven.
Well, and I think there is too something about like, even if you are confident in the gym, like just kind of like taking form videos or videos in general with people around, I feel like is still kind of an awkward thing, no matter
It
how
is. Yeah.
comfortable you feel. So I would imagine that that's probably nice too, to be able to do that regularly without having to worry about any of that.
Well, I have three separate, I like cell phone camera holders, like cell phone camera stands, and it's just strewn around in the gym. And I just take one and I put the camera in exactly how I want. I don't have to worry about someone in the back. I don't have to worry about people crossing in front of me.
Yep.
It really is. It's just you're spoiled rotten. The only thing it is missing is that scene. It's almost the same thing as like if you get. It's funny enough, my wife don't do this yet, but if you get like Amazon grocery delivery, or like what's that called, like Instacart or something,
Yeah.
versus going to the store. There's something different about going to the store. You can browse products in a different way. There's something to it. The same idea. There's definitely something missing, but like, if you're a competitive bodybuilder, this is a good analogy too, and you're on show prep, Instacart's great because you never have to go to the store and see all that stuff you've been missing. But if you're some off season and you're looking for some fun foods, yeah, there's something about
Yeah.
browsing the internet. It's just not the same. You're like, I want to see these products in real life and go, that's what I want. So for now, it's a really good setup. It just I will say to folks listening, if you get really inspired, training at your own gym, training at home, training in your garage, training in your basement is different, and it's not better. It's just different, and you've got to know by trying it maybe, or thinking about it, if it's the right thing for you. Because I'm really selling it. I'm like, oh my God, I get to do whatever I want. All the equipment is custom picked. Yes, but gee whiz, if you're in the gym remotely for social stuff, it can get lonely. Another thing is like post COVID and early during COVID, and then now that my wife and I live kind of far away from a major city and it's just the two of us and the dog, sometimes like on the weekends we'll go out with friends to eat. Um, it's just cool to see other people around,
Yeah.
to just being themselves, doing stuff. It's the greatest show on earth. Other people, like reality, the ultimate reality TV is when you're in the shit. So it is, you miss that, and there's something missing there with a gym. Sometimes you might even try harder if there's other people around. Like, if you mail in a set at home by yourself, it's between you and God. Nobody's going to see that. But so it's not for everyone, is what I'm trying to say. It's definitely a thing.
Well, I know during COVID, I didn't have a setup like you did, but I had to work out in the basement, and luckily I had some equipment that I could kind of get together. It wasn't the greatest setup, but I know towards the end of it, I was just like, man, this is getting, just because I think once you start to do everything at home, it's like, okay, it's nice to freaking get out and do something and just kind of get out of your routine that you're always around. Cause then it's like, you just can never kind of like switch off or anything like that too.
100%. It becomes at some point that the only difference between jail and home is that you're there voluntarily, but it feels the same. And you're like, I feel like I'm here all the time. I don't go anywhere else. And if your home is nice, it's nice. But even that, you got to switch it up every now and again. I think some people have a more sociological connection, a cultural connection when they work out. They might not
Yeah.
even know it. And I know people who have tried working out at home and they're like, that ain't for me. Like, one example is Jared Feather. He likes going to real gyms, and he loves coming to visit us and training in our gym for a few days. But I think, if he had all the money in the world, he probably wouldn't build himself a private gym and never leave his house. He'd be the very opposite of that. He might actually just travel around the country or the world training at different gyms because that is fun in its own appeal as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on the big pro too, is that you don't the exercise order, like, again, when you go to these busy gyms, it can be challenging to get to, some equipment, especially like I feel like cables and like leg press and stuff like that. So that's always nice to be able to have that. Or have you always been somebody that's just never really listened to music when you work out? Like, do you find that that's just not like, is there any particular reason, or do you just find that that just doesn't, something that's just has never worked for you?
That's a really good question. I suppose you've seen on my videos uh, from Instagram that I oftentimes do not have music while I'm training, nor are there headphones.
Or
And a
headphones, yeah.
lot of people will comment things like hashtag serial killer vibes. Um, so okay, how do I say this? Um, a couple points. Number one, music for me is very much a dichotomy. Maybe 10% or 5% of music, maybe less, I feel is like singing directly to my soul. And I love it and love it and love it and love it and love it. And then it's very emotional and it's very uplifting. It's very moving. And I don't really need any more energy in the gym. Like intensity is not a problem for me until I get to like the last half of the last week. And then I can strategically use that really good music that's like, oh man, this song is on, baby. It's either my knees are ripping into pieces or I'm getting 10 reps, right? Or the rest of music to me is like at best something I just kind of tune out, and at worst, just awful, terrible, sociologically dense noise. Like, I'll listen to music at the commercial gym if I go to a commercial gym. And, a lot of times the commercial gym, they'll play like top 40 or something. And I start listening to the lyrics because you're there all the fucking time. You're going to hear the lyrics. You're going to start to know what they are. I'm like, this is the most vile nonsense I've ever heard in my life. I disagree with it on principle. I think it's terrible. I hate how it sounds. I wish the singer the very best in this world, but if I never hear from him again, it'll be too soon. And it's just so annoying. And I'm like, all right, I can totally tune it out. But if I'm at my own gym, I can just go and it's
Turn
just
it off.
gone. And then I'm left with my thoughts, which I find plenty enough. And sometimes between sets, I'll like press play on a podcast or like a Lex Friedman interview or something. I just so to me, music is either like something you turn the horsepower up with, or it's something that is just kind of like, oh, like why is this on? Go away. And there is some category of music bet between those two. Like for example, like something like this is I'm gonna lose a lot of followers for this one. Smooth jazz, which a lot of people don't consider music at all, and I have all the time in the world for that. It is pleasant and it's not offensive and it's nice, but I also am not one of these people, maybe at most times, that needs a constant data stream.
Yeah.
I don't need constant stimulation. I have my plenty of thoughts in my own head that are quite stimulative. There's a lot to pay attention to during the exercise. So I'm like, people are like, oh my God, why don't you listen to music during your set? I'm like, motherfucker, first of all, it would be between sets that I actually heard it. If you're hearing a lot of music during your set, either it's just not going hard enough, or you're not paying attention to enough cues. I'm trying to do a good job. I have no idea what the lyrics were during my set of pull-ups. After my set of pull-ups, I kind of rather not hear lyrics. I have a ton of stuff. Sometimes one of the things I like to do is scroll on my phone between sets and like read stuff, things that like, I find valuable. I even watch funny videos, but like just not listening to music that to me is just mostly a waste of time. So that's kind of how I feel about it. And a lot of times for me, training is one of the times in my day that I get no data streams, which is really sweet because the other times in my day, I'm talking to people, I'm listening to people, I'm writing, I'm reading, I'm watching YouTube, I'm listening to Spotify. And then it's like, it's all the time, constant input, output, input, output, input, output. The gym is kind of a cool break from that. So for me, it's like, if you have some silence at the gym, it's kind of cool to maybe embrace that shit and be like, this is nice. This is kind of therapeutic. Like you wouldn't go to like like a very secluded Colorado mountaintop pine forest lake, stand on the beach and be like, Cardi B would be fucking sweet right now.
Yeah.
You'd be like, man, this is good just by itself. And there's beauty in silence by itself. And I like to enjoy the shit out of that, but when I can. So to me, that kind of, I don't know, excessively long answer for why I don't listen to music. But that's kind of the whole answer. I don't have much more to say about that. Hopefully that was okay.
Yeah, no, that was good. I think it's, because I think some people use it to, kind of motivate, but I think it's just probably like a pre-workout too, where it's like you could almost like kind of overstimulate yourself and whatnot and almost do more than what you can recover from. So I've definitely been kind of messing around with that a little bit to where I don't just always listen to music, because I feel like it's just like anything. If you need that to kind of push you through, it's like, all right, you gotta kind of think through that. But no, I like that you also use that time as just kind of a time to just not have any inputs or anything like that. And that's hard to do in today's world.
Yes, yes, and it's certainly a fine opportunity for it. And again, I have plenty of stuff to pay attention to while I'm training that doesn't involve music. And the thing is, like, for whoever hears this, you know, this is my weird quirkiness. And if it makes sense to you, try it. But if you're like, dude, I like my music and I love my headphones and go to hell, like, hey, sweet, word up. I
Yeah.
never in a million years look at people who wear headphones in the gym and I'm like, pussies, like I
Yeah.
remember there was one thing I read. I forget who it was, some pro bodybuilder in a muscle magazine some few years back, and he was talking about some exercise or technique or something, and or myth, and he's like, it's ruined more physiques or almost as many physiques as all of the headphones in the world. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, if listening to music ruins your physique, maybe you're just going into a trance and just vibrating instead of training. That I can understand. But most people I've seen listen to music while training, they still train just fine. It's like if your technique goes out the window when you're listening to music, yo, I want to hear what the hell you're listening to, bro.
Exactly. That's my
You know
thought
what I'm
too.
saying?
I want to
Let me
hear what
hear
you're
that
listening to.
shit. Right. But, some people do get, yeah, but like you said, it can be overstimulating. It can lead to a degradation in technique. Mostly that's not what's going to happen. Mostly you just go a few reps extra hard. And honestly, that's okay in the grand scheme of things. And it's something you can fix in a few mesocycles if you're honest with yourself. Like, okay, anytime I bump Lizzo, I just lose it and I got to do a couple extra reps. I'm gonna save Lizzo during the actual set for week 4 pre-deload. That's Lizzo week. All the other weeks I listen to whatever Bon Jovi or some shit like that. There's a good combo for you.
Or classic jazz or something like that too.
Hey, watch. You have some respect for
That's
old
lit.
timey music.
That's Lizzo week. I love it. That's what I'm gonna start telling my clients now. All right, we're saving Lizzo. We're saving Lizzo for the last week of your
They're
mesocycle.
like, but I don't like Lizzo. You're like, shut up. Hit the play on Lizzo. They're like, I hate this. I'm not buying sessions from you anymore.
So speaking of your training, I was just kind of curious to hear, kind of where you're at with that. Just because I feel like I haven't heard you on Steve Hall's podcast for a little while. And I usually get your training update from there. So I'm just curious to hear, kind of where you're at in your training and maybe some like kind of future plans coming up for you with training.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I'm currently training full out mass gaining. It's week 3 right now, middle of week 3. So I just had a back workout that was like pretty good. My pull-ups were humbling because I'm massing. You know how that is. You gain some weight and your pull-ups are like, oh, you're weak. So that's happening. And I'm basically have like whatever's left of November, December, January, February to keep massing. March, I switch gears. End of March, and then April, May, June, most of July. The plan is to do a show diet for Masters Nationals
Cool.
in late July, and I've already, I guess, pre-qualified for that show. So I just have to diet down and just go do that show, and we'll see how that goes. So hopefully it'll go well, and I can do some damage. I'm not specifically shooting for a pro card. I think that actually is philosophically an impossibility because you can't shoot for a result. You can shoot for, oh, sorry, I said it backwards. You can't shoot for an outcome. You can shoot for a result. I'm shooting to bring myself in bigger than ever, which I already am, but I have a few more months of even pushing that nail deeper into the wood. And then I have a goal to bring my conditioning to the very next level. And every time I've competed, I brought my conditioning to the next level. And I've started off really shitty conditioning. But last year at Masters USA's, I was probably one of the best conditioned guys at the show, certainly the best conditioned guy in the super heavies. And I took second. So I'm like, okay, one more big move of increased vascularity, leanness, and all that stuff. Like I could be difficult to be in the same class with. So we'll see how that goes.
Awesome. Yeah. Was the last time you competed? Was it a year ago? Was it last kind of
Last
December-ish
December
timeframe?
15th. Uh-huh.
Cool. And since then, have you just been massing the entire time, or have you kind of thrown in like some mini cuts in
Definitely,
between?
definitely throwing in some mini cuts. To me, at this point, one of the most difficult things with massing is appetite. And like it's actually very difficult for me to gain weight because it's very difficult for me to be hungry enough to eat enough food. Um, and I'm using, of course, all the special sport supplements that one does in this case. Maybe not all. Certainly, I haven't messed with appetite increasing pharmacology yet. But what I do is when I reach a point where I can't stuff myself anymore, my weight stalls out, I just do a mini cut for one of the express purposes a mini cut is designed for, which is to potentiate appetite. And recently, the way my body's been responding is like I just keep getting progressively leaner every time I do that. So, like the last time, I guess a month and a half back, when I peaked in my massing phase, I was like sort of about 250 pounds. I had veins in my abs, but I couldn't eat any more food. It's a
That's
strange
interesting.
experience. And it does illustrate the fact that settling points are a big deal. Some people will say, well, your hunger is going to be tied directly to how lean you are. But we all know pretty lean people that just aren't really big eaters. And we all know pretty fat people that can still eat like trucks. So, of course, between individuals, that must not be true. But then, even within one individual, I mean, the first time I ever got to about 10% body fat, I was ravenous. The second time I got to 10% body fat, I was like, yeah, I can eat. The third time I got to 10% body fat, I was like, meh, and I was kind of normal. Now I hang around, right now, I'm probably somewhere between 8 and 10 or something. Like I have visible cross striations on my obliques. I have veins in my abs. My glute lines are partially in, which is strange. And bro, I look at food and I'm like, ugh.
That's crazy.
Like, yeah, my surplus is my calorie intake for gaining at a very slow rate is 4,300 calories a day, and almost exclusively in clean food. And Jesus Christ, man, it's that's not the end of the world, but it's something. So
What do you, so basically it sounds like, is this, because I know you've gotten up to like, I think you've said upwards of like 280s almost in, I think in the past. And so you're obviously at a lower body weight, but you said this is kind of the biggest you've been. Are you kind of like, again, I think it sounds like you're listening to your body on this in terms of if you're going to push it up more, but you're finding that around 250 now is kind of that like that top end point where you're at with,
it's where my hunger just doesn't
yeah.
have any more interest. Um, and much past 250, I have pretty serious mobility issues.
Yeah.
Now, somebody we've had on the YouTube channel, um, Dom Trivellini. You could Google him if you like, if you're listening to this. He's 1 inch shorter than me, so he's 5'5", I'm 5'6". And when we had him in, he was 265 and fluffy, but not fat. He wouldn't call him a fat guy. He was clearly all of his muscles were separated out. Like you could tell what his pecs and shoulders and triceps and biceps were separately. And I was like, Dom, how do you sleep? He's like, bro, he's like, I need like 7 pillows, various parts of my body, and a CPAP machine. And only then is that actually workable. And I'm thinking, okay, I currently need at least 3 pillows to sleep with. Ideally, like 4 or 5. Somehow I got genetics that means I don't have sleep apnea, even at this body weight. But as I move up beyond 250 and add some combination of muscle and fat, I mean, oh man, how much am I going to say here? Showering and washing my own armpits becomes very difficult because my everything here gets so big I can barely reach across. Shaving becomes tough. I can't I can't do this anymore because my biceps and everything here gets so big that I have to like do that. Um, and it just becomes not so much fun. And if I'm there at a little bit fluffier body fat, what I'm thinking to myself is, why don't I just mini cut this body fat away, go back to 240-ish, work my way up to 250? And that's sort of what I've been doing for the past year. And every time I get to 250, I'm leaner than before, more comfortable than before, a little bit, but not by much, because at this point, the muscle itself is just a huge pain. My arms have been a priority of mine, and they're getting so big now that they just get in the way of stuff. They just feel just, ugh, they're just everywhere. It just always feels like I'm wearing like 5 winter coats, and it's kind of strange. And to be honest, I'm really kind of over it. Um, that dream of mega size. I've drank enough from that cup to where I'm gotten drunk and hung over on it. I'm like, no thanks. So at this point, I'm still trying to gain some tissue, but I'm doing it more in that lower body fat range to where I can stay healthier, stay less uncomfortable. And the really good thing is I'm experiencing like the worst hunger ever at a very lean 245 to 250. If I start prep at this kind of level, maybe hopefully a few pounds more muscle, halfway through prep, I'm going to be in the high 230s and like be really shredded and still not hungry, probably, and still just normal. And then the tail end of prep is made so much easier. I would rather be in a place where I'm really like have a huge, huge buffer zone to really carve in that leanness. I hate doing a show prep where I'm chasing the calendar and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I sure hope I have time to get lean enough. I'm done with that. Nowadays, I like to get really lean a month before and then use the last month to really grind into just some abysmal level. Because at the end of the day, I know a little secret about bodybuilding. It's that the leanest person on stage gets the first look. And a lot of times, judges really will glaze over lines and appearance and symmetry, and we'll just tell you, hey, you took fourth. You have an amazing physique and amazing potential, but you need to be diced because that's who we look at first. Another way to say this: bodybuilding is first a leanness contest, then it is a size contest, then it is a shape contest. And maybe those last two can be flip flop depending on the division, depending on the show, but leanness always comes first. So, two examples, and I don't mean remotely to talk smack about these guys that are gods compared to me and always will be in physique, but like Regan Grimes and Quentin Beastwood is his name. I forget what his real name is on Instagram. I mean, they're both Canadian, hilariously, and they're just beautiful physiques, huge, almost perfect symmetry and incredible lines. They have a tough time cracking high up in the Olympia, sometimes even winning shows, because they're still young and on their way to getting lean, 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 lean.
Yeah.
And they're getting beat by guys who like, don't look that great, but they turn around, they squeeze their glutes, and you're like, that guy won.
He
What
won.
the
Yeah.
hell's going on with him? So I think most people have the capacity to get that lean, and thus just through a lot of diligence and lack of a better term, suffering, you can make a bit of a splash for yourself just by going to that next level of lean. And you can't do that if you're like, oh, I hope I have enough time. You got to get
Yeah.
started early and find yourself show ready, technically, a month out. And then the next 3 weeks, you just peel and peel and peel. And then you step on stage, people are like, holy crap, what the hell happened to that guy? And then good things happen.
Yeah, that was kind of my first. Like, I've done 2 amateur natural bodybuilding shows, so nothing like
The
crazy or
same
anything.
thing though at that level,
Well,
right?
it was for me. It was like when I first did it. This was kind of like I was like, oh man, I'm lean enough, and it was like, damn, I wasn't even like close. Like you
Right.
think you're there, and it's like you still need to go like way further. And then I did another one a year later, and same thing. It was like I felt even leaner then, but it was like I needed to go even further than that, which is pretty crazy. You kind of mentioned this too. You said you think you'll be leaner. Do you think that once you get to like a certain level of leanness, it gets easier to like get back to that level of leanness and then like push it a little bit more as
without
you,
a doubt,
yeah.
without a doubt. I wouldn't have thought this unless I experienced it myself. Um, it really is crazy. I remember talking to John Meadows. He talked to me for free. I was going to pay him for consult. He wouldn't let me. RIP. It was amazing. And I had a bunch of questions for him, a lot of them about masters bodybuilding. And I was like, John, how does like the body fat thing work getting in shape as you age? He's like, in my experience, it's just easier. And I'm like, no way. And he's like, bro, he's like, if you put a gun to my head, I could get contest lean in 6 weeks from just sitting here and training normal and eating normally. All I need is 6 weeks. For sure, I can do it. It won't be fun, but I can do it. I was like, oh my God, that's how many people can say that? That's crazy, right? But and some people say, oh, John had great genetics for being lean, which maybe he did. But in my own, I remember like I just told this story on another podcast. The first time I got striated glutes on stage, I dieted for 22 weeks for that show. Not all of that was super hypocaloric. There were some ups and downs, some fatigue reduction, and stuff like that. But it was like a long process. The next time I started dieting for a show after massing, about 8 weeks in, my glutes started to come in, and I was like, okay, this is really happening. Like, and I have actually, funny enough, one of my fattest parts is this separation between the delt, tricep, and bicep. I could just hold a lot of
Interesting.
fat there for some reason. And I remember like barely seeing definition there until like 3 weeks before that second to last show. Coming up to the last show, it was 8 weeks out that I started seeing it. And I was like, okay. And then right now, I'm off season, weighing 245. I can see it all the time. And I'm like, huh. And one thing is, as I age, and as most people do, they store more fat inside their abdomen. The intra-abdominal fat goes up. So my waist is definitely bigger, but the rest of me is leaner. But now as I diet, my waist gets small pretty fast, and the rest of me just shreds out. So there's definitely in my observation and my observation of others is that not even just an age thing, but I think an experience thing is every time you get leaner, getting back to that leanness is not as hard. And thus, by definition, pushing even further becomes possible. Notice I didn't say easier because pushing the farthest you've ever gone is always just as hard as it ever was.
Great.
Like if you've been 6% fat, going to 5 or 4% is as getting 6% for the first time. It's brutal. But if you've been 5% fat, getting through five is like, it's tough. But then getting to three could be the end of the world. So there's always new ground to discover, but it really is absolutely a thing that it's just not the same. Which is really great news. Can you
Yeah.
imagine if it was the other way around, or if it was just as hard every time? That would sting.
Do you think it's more physiological or more psychological, or maybe a combination of kind of both things going on there?
It's definitely a combination, but I will say I think it's highly physiological because I'm I like to think I'm pretty well in touch with my psychology. And I have a really bad track record with a placebo effect. I just don't believe in it for myself. So I don't even understand the mechanisms of how that would work. So to me, I always approach every diet like this is going to get real as fuck. And the diets to which I diet to a new body fat, they never disappoint me. They're so hard. But diets in which I diet to the same body fat, they're just easier. And I was expecting the same thing. I would never expect like, oh, getting to 10% this time is going to be easy. I never did expect that any of the diets I had. This is something that just occurred. And I was like, this is like a real pleasant surprise. It's not like I was expecting it, which would be a psychological thing. I don't know how else it would be psychological. I do have a better grasp of my approach. I do have a better grasp of
Yeah.
expectations. I do have a better grasp of my process. Like I count my steps. I know what deficit. I know what foods to eat. But I was never doing that in a way that was like would make a real big difference. 5 versus 6 meals a day doesn't matter.
Right.
Like we all know that stuff doesn't matter. And it's just one of those things where you do the same stuff as always. In my experience, I've done more or less similar stuff, different on the margins. I would do things that were I would expect to be equally difficult, same expectations, and every time I'm really pleasantly surprised how much easier it is. Now, before people get too uh, optimistic, I will say that there is another side to the story. And it's one of those things where you pay a lot of suffering on the front end to benefit on the back end. That's my favorite kind of thing that happens in life. I love to do my work early and get the benefits later. The late gratification is amazing. I love building towards a future. But to that end, on the one hand, you think, oh, wow, like it gets easier every time and you sort of just get really good results and you're surprised by them. Yes. But the other thing is something you kind of alluded to. The first time or the first few times you try to get lean like they have in the muscle magazines, you end up thinking, in some sense, like, this is impossible. Nobody can do this. It's impossible. I remember dieting one time for like 20 weeks, and I went from being fat to like less fat. And I was like, are you serious?
Yep.
There has to be something down there that looks like abs eventually, right? Or am I in like the mountain that which they said that was gold, but it's all just coal and I'm just working through the coal? Like that's what it feels like. So what I would say to people is, and this is a question I'm sure you get plenty. Should I do a show? My response to that is always the same. You should get ultra lean first by yourself for fun. See how that works. Do a little slow mass phase, gain maybe 6 pounds over 12 weeks. That's nothing. Maintenance phase, cool off, recover, and then go do a show prep. But if that first diet, you think, oh, 16-week diet, I'll be looking like show prep. You do 16 weeks and you're just like, oh, cool, I have abs for the first time. And I have like an inch of fat on my glutes. That's not show prep. That's not even close. You may need to do 2 or 3 more diets later after some massing
Yep.
and maintaining to even start to dig enough to where you get that. So yes, it looks cool when you're on the tail end of that process and be like, oh my God, dieting's the easiest it's ever been. I'm getting leaner and leaner every show, no problem. But you forget how much you had to suffer before that. And some people are genetically elite. They don't ever have to suffer the entire time. But for most people, it will definitely be that situation. Like the one does not simply Mordor meme comes up. It's like, one does not simply diet for a show. Like, or in other words, one does not simply get show lean. It's a very, very big difference. Like you see people at the gym. One of the things is like watching movies. When I grew up, I'd watch like action movies and various other things, and I'd be like, oh, various characters were like, oh, that's lean, like lean and muscular, right? When you actually do a diet for a show and you're 2 weeks out and you walk into the gym and people look at you like, what the fuck is going on? Because your face is so sunk in, you look like a skeleton. And then you rewatch that same show that later that week on a Thursday, and you're like, that guy's fat by show standards. The hell did I think he was lean? His lines
Yep.
suck and his arms are small. Like I'm a god compared to this guy. And it's like, right, it's just a very, very different situation. It's like driving race cars and then getting sent on a rocket to the moon. Like one of those goes a lot faster than the other. So you kind of sometimes lose track of like where you are in that whole sphere.
Yeah, and I think the expectations too. I think people see these like 12-week transformations and think that they can have that. And it's like, man, it just freaking takes time. And it's also like if you do go at it too fast and I'm thinking like person that's like 15 to 20% body fat, you try to go at it too fast. And it's just like, again, like you said, towards the end, it just gets super hard. And then on top of it, it's like you could be risking muscle loss, which isn't going to be great for your overall look. So it's like at the end of the day, you just really can't like rush the process. And I think it ends up being a thing where you end up you think it's like going to take one fat loss diet to get to the level of leanness you want to get, but I feel like it ends up for most people taking multiple ones of, like you said, fat loss, either a mass or a maintenance or something, and then another fat loss phase.
Yes, 100%. And I've been on this. I've been on the world's smallest soapbox, playing the smallest violin for a long time. But I will say this: I think it's just something that's good to put out there in the cultural ether, so it becomes maybe more common wisdom than not. Again, the quote is, "One does not simply do a show," and the background to that is something like, shows are competitive, right? And you're by definition look exotic. Like they don't put lean people on stage; they put exotic people on stage, freaky stuff. You want to become a freak, you will be put through a very, very interesting process. It's similar to the idea that, like, let's say um, you had like a regular station wagon, and then you started like following motorsport a little bit and fast cars and tune-ups, and then you got like a really juiced out of its mind Mustang. Like, great, that's sweet. And then you ask your friends like, hey, should I do a drag race? Bro, hold on a second. That's the real deal. You could die. And there's so much that goes into that. And my buddy who works for RP, one of our coaches, Derek Wilcox, he actually is a nutrition and training coach for a bunch of the top drag racers in the world. And he's himself a recreational drag racer, if there's such a thing. And he says that some of the things that happen is if you go on the very fast, and I think the funny car class are the ones that go the fastest. He's like a pretty not common but not rare medical problem is that their retinas will fall back into their eyes and they'll just not be able to see the same way ever again and just retire. I'm like, oh my fucking god, like,
That sounds
that level of acceleration, right? But that's the Mr. Olympia of drag racing,
yeah,
right? And then the local drag racing is like a local show, but it's like, you do this by accident dragging,
you're
you
done.
die. And so it's like, a soccer mom who used to drive a Honda Civic, but then got like a V6 coupe is like the same thing as that same soccer mom getting sort of a little lean for the first time in her life, feeling her swag. And she's like, should I do a bikini show? You're like, pause. Let's talk about what that means. Let's take your V6, coupe, take it on flat, empty Walmart parking lot at night and gas it as fast as possible and see how fast you are. And
Yeah.
see, because she could try that and just one time she kind of swerves and catches the car. And she's like, I'm never doing that again. And you're like, okay, great, let's just get out of here. Like, or she's like, hey, I love this, I want more. And then you go faster
Then
and
do it.
faster by yourself before you enter a drag race. You posted numbers, and that's the whole thing of getting lean enough to be like, oh, okay, now if you see glute striations in the mirror, hey, you're ready to go. But until you do, there may be more steps to that process
Yeah.
to get them than you think.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think people don't realize like how tough. I've been trying to kind of get this point across. Like it's just so tough to stay in a calorie deficit and like adhere to a calorie deficit in today's world. And if you don't have those like skills like you talked about, I mean, it just becomes exponentially tougher. And so, like you said, it's just like, all right, let's temper our expectations here, depending on where you've been and whatnot, to see if you can actually handle even more. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about. I know we're kind of coming to the end here on time, but I'm curious to hear about your training. Um, I'm wondering, is everything pretty much the same as it has been? I don't know if there has been any like changes or anything that you've implemented with your training over the last like year or so. I'm just kind of curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yes, thank you for asking. My big revelation in 2022 with my own training is can be summarized with two revelations. One, quality beats frequency. I for a while was trying 3 or 4 bicep and shoulder workouts a week because the frequency literature says that's better. And it makes logical sense because they don't take a lot of disruption and you can train them frequently. What I realized there was I never really developed a really good mind muscle connection because it was so few number of sets, no great pumps, and joints were always kind of like because you train your shoulder 4 times a week, they never really get a chance to heal. And what I did was I reduced my training of those muscles to 3 times a week, 2 harder sessions and 1 slightly easier session, and everything just started moving like gravy. It was the sessions were a little longer, and it really allowed me to dig into my biceps and shoulders 4, 5, 6 sets, really start to feel the muscle, feel the burn, feel the tension, great connection and everything. Like, okay, wow, this is really going well. And that was a big revelation. And especially with some of the literature that's coming out now, that yes, for short periods of time, higher training frequency can help, but there's just not a huge difference between, for most muscles, training 2 times a week for that muscle or 3 times a week. And if your quality of training and enjoyment of training, the recovery ability and joint stuff is just better with 2 days a week, that's just the clear winner. So I've sort of come to that back to a little bit more of an equilibrium. I'm not doing bro splits. I'm not training once a week for muscle, but 2 to 3 times instead of 3 to 4 times, and sometimes 5 times like I was trying. That's first revelation. The second one is that I'm purposefully taking swigs of my own medicine, so to speak. What I preach in the various media outlets that I talk my talk through, including podcasts like yours, and especially now the YouTube channel, which is growing super fast, is the way you select exercise for hypertrophy is just mostly via the stimulus to fatigue ratio. Like, is the exercise giving you a great pump, great burn, great tension, great fatigue to the muscle, great soreness later, and is it super easy on your joints? Like, if those are the things, that's a good exercise. And if there are no better exercises for that muscle group for that day, that's the one you should be doing until it gets stale, its SFR drops, something replaces it. That's how I say to pick exercises. In real life, I've been okay about it, but I also pick movements based. I mean, I used to be a power lifter, and to me, the barbell basics is still something to it. And even an exercise like bent rows, I mean, I have old PRs. I kind of want to break. And I've been peeling myself away from that, trying to hit PRs in exercises that don't have the best stimulus to fatigue ratio, using more exercise that do have a better ratio, even if they're not so sexy for Instagram, and even if they're not so sexy for my ego. Um, and it's just been way better to do that. And I'm bashing myself in the head for not doing it earlier. There is just this past week, I literally ran into that. I was doing one of my days this week is leg curls, seated leg curls, then leg presses, and then squats. Squats, I started at 405 pounds because, like, god damn it, I'm a 4 plate squatter.
Yeah.
There's a YouTube video of me squatting 5 plates for a set of 10, high bar. And I'm like, that was years ago. And I remember what I was leg pressing back then and doing for other leg assistance work. And my quads are just like so much bigger and stronger than they were back then. It's not even close. To drive that point home, I usually would leg press on the Arsenal leg press that I have at home, something like anywhere between 5 plates and 6 plates, rarely over 6 plates. If I got over 6 plates, it was like, whoa, this is really heavy. In 2 weeks, barring some kind of traumatic injury, I'll almost certainly leg press 7 plates for a set of 12. Oh my, it's just light years away from anything I was able to do. On the pendulum squat, I'm handling loads that are just like mind boggling. Like, I remember doing 220 pounds on that thing and just rocketing down and barely getting out for 3 reps and being like, wow, that's too much weight. I'm going back to 180. And I just last week did 220 for strict, slow, paused sets of 10. I mean, like, like 3 versus 2 sets of 10, that's a big fucking difference. And I'm like, damn it, I know I've got the strength. I want to show off on squats. But the stimulus to fatigue ratio of high bar squats for me at this point, with how much axial loading, like, spinal loading, versus just doing more sets on the leg press and using lighter weight on the squat afterwards, like 315 for sets of 12 instead of 405 for sets of 8 or something. It's just better. It's just better. And I'm like, last week, I like, okay, Israetel, just shut up and think. Stop feeling. What's the right thing to do logically? So, okay, reduce weight on the squat, go for mind muscle connection. Done. Amazing workout. Chance of injury almost zero.
Lower, yeah.
4 plates plus, you pull, you walk that squat out. It's kind of like, oh, something goes wrong. I don't know, man. Like, this is real weight. For me, with 3 plates, it's just like, whatever. I'd have to be in some kind of weird position for me to get hurt. It's highly unlikely. So I'm like, okay, you got another 2 to 4 years in the sport. You really got your best physique ever. You really want to put that cherry on top and show up on stage a few times looking diced. Is you using 405 to get the same result, arguably slightly worse, but with a much higher risk of injury? Is it worth it for like an Instagram reel? Fuck no. So what is the principle that determines exercise selection? Oh, it's SFR. That's the heuristic we use. Well, then just use it yourself, dummy.
Yeah.
And I've just been using it myself more, and it's been super great. The PRs are funky because it's PRs on exercises I just don't care about. If someone's like, "Oh, I hit a PR on the leg press," like, shut up. If I ever hear someone say that, I'm punching them right in the face, and they know they deserve it too. Like, so what a wussy exercise. I just think it's PR on the leg press. But at the same time, that's the kind of stuff that builds muscle best. And I'm just trying to hold my own feet to the fire on that.
Yeah, no, that's good to hear because I think that, even somebody that's as advanced as you are, that you're still working on those things, I think is, just goes to show that, hey, you just have to keep doing that year over year, like you keep improving over time. I have a question. Are you using the Arsenal pendulum squat by chance?
Yes.
That thing is freaking unbelievable. My gym has the Arsenal pendulum squat, and man, I have not found a piece of equipment that is tougher on the quads than that one. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on it, but
I would like it to be loaded more at the bottom. It's fundamentally designed not to do that, but it is insanely humbling, and it's a very good piece of equipment. Um, the Arsenal leg press is my favorite piece of quad equipment I have
yeah,
ever used, maybe ever will. But the pendulum squat, one thing I do have to say for it is maybe one of the most humbling pieces of equipment you'll
yes,
ever use.
yep.
I'm sure you've seen this at your gym, like some generally bigger guy have never used it before, and he'll put like 3 plates on it, and you're like, you're an idiot.
You're
And
not gonna make
he
it.
unracks it, and he's like, rack that one. JK, when you unrack a machine, and you're like, wait a minute, how come it's crushing me right now? This is nonsense. It's not supposed to feel that heavy. And I've seen people eat shit on that machine and peel themselves out. So it really is kind of cool in that regard. And it's nothing, there's no amount of weight you can put on there and it look cool. You're like, all
Yep.
right, that's like 4 plates, whatever. That's like what I have on one side of the squat bar. You're like, whatever. It's just you got to try it. It's just harder than it looks.
It's funny you say that, but I honestly my gym's a little bit like it's a big gym, but there's not a lot of people that go in there, and I rarely see anybody ever use that machine.
Yeah. Why would you? It hurts. It's
Yep.
humbling. It gives you great results. It's all I
I
want.
I find it's toughest. It's like you said, it's not toughest at the bottom, but when you kind of get to the middle, that's where it's just like, ooh, man, I found myself like really having to push through that
Yes.
part of it.
Yes. One of the things I love that machine for is it makes you be really diligent with slowing down the eccentric because
Yeah,
it wants you to just go thump.
down
And if
quick.
you
Yeah.
try to slow it down, I can literally feel my muscles tearing as I slow down. I'm like,
Hmm.
ah. And then when I come back up, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Then I go back down, I'm like, ah. So it builds that kind of thing. Like for me, the Arsenal pendulum, doing it for a few months, made me really good at leg pressing. Because one of my things with leg press is I always want to shift the weight from my quads to my glutes,
Mm.
like kind of sit into the machine and let the quads do whatever, and then sort of press with my hips. But and every time I try to focus on the quads, I'm like, this is just really uncomfortable for my quads. But because you only use your quads to slow the weight down in a pendulum, there's just no option. They become really resilient to that. And so when I unrack leg presses now, I'm like, oh, all day, no problem. I can lower this at 5 seconds, no problem. Whereas before the pendulum work, it was like, oh man, slow lowering is really hard. So
Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to pay attention to that because we also have the Arsenal leg press as well too. So cool, Dr. Mike. I know you said you had a run here at the top of the hour. So I appreciate your time in coming back on here. I guess is there anything coming up for you or anywhere where you would like to lead the audience here? This episode will probably be out in a couple of weeks. So I just to kind of give you a time
yeah,
frame on it.
great. Well, we do huge Black Friday, Cyber Monday sale. We have training templates. We have a diet app at RP, all good stuff. So come renaissanceperiodization.com and get that stuff. It's going to be super, super discounted. We're even discounting coaching. The other thing is just give our YouTube channel a look because we're on
Yep.
YouTube and it's a big deal. And we're going to be passing, well, by the time you see this video, we'll have passed probably 400,000 subscribers, which is
Awesome.
really neat. You got multiple videos every single time. And if you guys are real nerds, you can sign up for the members area for YouTube and you get tons of extra videos that are, for lack of a better term, too nerdy to put on the regular channel. It just won't get enough views and people will think we're not funny and we suck. So if you want that extra level of insight, come subscribe to the channel and then become a member. It's like $5 a month or something. And then you get tons of stuff.
I guess you basically just confirmed that I'm a nerd, I guess, at that point, because I am a member there of the YouTube content. So I guess you just confirmed it.
If you're hosting a muscle podcast, I
Yeah.
think that confirms the nerdiness.
I guess I left over that part of it. You're right.
Exactly.
All right, Dr. Mike, again, appreciate your time, man, and we will chat with you soon.
Thanks so much, man.